Hello and welcome to Speightstown, a forgotten treasure. I'm glad you've joined us. In last week's program, we look at this town's architecture and illustrate how external influences can contribute to the diffusion of culture here in historic Speightstown. In this week's program, we shall look at that special magic that fuels Speightstown, that which kept the engine of Speightstown going in former years. We begin with colleague Amory Berg, who is pursuing an MSc in Tourism Management at the Cafel campus of the University of the West Indies. During a presentation on the possible future of Speightstown, Amory pondered on a question pertinent to this program.
Who is Speightstown? Speightstown is Mr. Williams, the community centenarian. It's Miss Yearwood who sells her produce right outside the Eddie's supermarket. It's the Arlington House Museum, the Mahaica playing field. It's Station Sergeant Roach and her officers serving and protecting the community. It's a Cold Banks Bear and Fisherman's Pub. A walk by the Esplanade, Sunday morning service at St. Peter's Anglican Church. It's the buildings, it's the people, it's the history. It's a town with a lot of character. Speightstown is as Bajan as it gets.
Speightstown was also, even though we speak of it as a town, it was mainly agricultural. I think of the canes being planted in Farm Road. I think of persons traveling to the farm plantation and Worley and Haymans, where canes were ground. A number of people were just agricultural workers.
Now, you have to take this in a context. They're poor people, they're working at, in agriculture, or they're working as domestics. And on Fridays, people would get paid late. Now, my father was a tailor. He had a shop and people would pay, well, I don't know if you understand what that means, when they had the money. So that means that on Friday evenings, persons will be going to the shop late. Shops close at 8 o'clock. And persons will be in the shop calling for pounds and gills and ounces of things. You didn't have, like butter. You couldn't go and buy a tin of butter. You had, were these big tins, and you would get ounce or quart or whatever. And the biscuits, you would get them by the piece. So you wouldn't get a pack of biscuits, you would get 5 cents in biscuits.
Saturday it came alive even more, because now all the hawkers are bringing down their food from Boscobel and Indian Ground and from everywhere. And all of the sidewalks are full of people selling everything, and there's this friendly attitude where people are passing and you know, one person shouts the other person, and somebody says, wait, so you ain't shouting me too? And I say, oh, you know, I gotta leave the best for the last. And there was always this friendly rivalry between the hawkers.
Along the streets of Speightstown, on Saturday mornings when I go with my mother, it used to be very colorful. As I was seeing a lot of trays, all the hawkers on the side of the road with the trays, fully stocked, all local vegetables.
I used to love when my mother sent me down to buy vegetables, to buy the beans and the carrots and things like that. It was not a lot of money, but she made sure. And in those days, you couldn't buy enough to last the whole week, so Sunday lunch was always a time when you had the extra beans and all the extra greens. If you had a little bit extra, or if you grew it in your yard, well, maybe you could have some more during the week, but very often people went to buy their Sunday greens on Saturday mornings.
Saturday morning in Speightstown was like town morning. The buses would come down Chapel Street. The buses came down on Queen Street, which is the front street. So buses were passing through the town.
So I grew up in St. Lucie. Yes. And to go to Speightstown was like going to Bridgetown. This was the place for shopping, not the big supermarkets we have nowadays, but a number of small shops. And occasionally we would go to Speightstown. We had to walk from Spring Garden, where I lived, we're near Spring Hall, to St. Lucy's Parish Church to get the bus, which would go take us to Speightstown. This was the place for shopping.
You had people coming from St. Andrew, from St. Lucy, from St. James, and the town was full of people. It was the shopping mecca of the north, really.
I just loved the entire atmosphere, especially in the area there by the old Noel Roach, by the pharmacy. That was a wonderful place on Saturday mornings. And when I came with my mother, especially when I was very young, my mother would buy things, and as she's leaving, they would say, "Come, little girl," or "Come, little Miss Pegs," and they would put, you know, a little hand of bananas in your hand, or 3 or 4, or sometimes they're selling sweet bread and they push it in a little bag, and people were so generous. And I always remember Speightstown for that, the generosity of people.
And there were some shops along the sea coast. I'm not sure how many persons remember that these days. The shops which were along the coast, and people were able to come from all over the country, I mean in the northern part of the country, in order to do the shopping.
You had the dry goods store, you had the cloth stores.
Chief supermarket there was E.R. Corbin's supermarket. Everybody went to E.R. Corbin to get groceries there. That was about the best that they had.
Where the Nazarene Church is now, that was, in my recollection, the first attempt at a supermarket in Speightstown. That was a Colonnade supermarket.
Selling hardwares and things too.
There were 3 grocery shops that I can remember. Gonzalez shop, Proverbs shop, and Athlete's shop. Just where Wally's is now, that was Athlete's shop. At the corner where Eddie's has his boutique, and so that was Proverbs. And
I was so tiny when I went to the shop with my mama. You know, there used to be big bags of scratch grain and animal feed outside of the counter, and I would stand upon them to see over the counter, you know. But, and those were the days, no computers, and the people in the shops just wrote down what you had and put the price. And then they just went and they added it up. You know, you saw them going that, and they gave you the cost, and it was right. I don't know how many people can do that now.
Then over that, when you pass Church Street corner now, you're going to Orange Street. Down there's not Sandy Street. From the corner Church Street to the corner of the old police station is Orange Street. And it used to be Jordan. You remember Miss Elaine Jordan used to live over Gardens Alley. Her father, right at the corner there where that shop is now, had a hardware store there also. Tall red man.
And just next to the Esplanade, that was the other shop, yeah.
But there were other shops all the way up, but different types of shops. And the little cloth stores, the little haberdasheries, and you could get just about everything in Speightstown.
We also had its own butcher shops down by where the bread shop is now. The butcher store was down there. We had the Esplanade, which has now been upgraded.
Before the Esplanade was there was a house there owned by Mr. Walker, the Walkers.
We used to call them Washer and Miss Griffith. Because when I was going to school, I used to go and do messages for her before we go to St. Peter's School.
That was a scene when they had to move. It was very painful for them. I remember that.
Where the Esplanade bandstand is, used to be a shop, a rum shop, right where the bandstand is. And all there used to be, but you know, it had burned down years ago with the Ramses were above. right where the church wall come down, used to the Ramsey. He has a store there, and then he was Undertaker too. Right where the church wall wasn't down there before. It's further up, and there used to be a big store there. Now it's the churchyard. And you go all down, it used to be the Payne Baker shop.
When we had one bakery, when you had to do your dough at home and bring your bread, my mother always told me that she felt she had the sweet bread. Because by the time they done bake, somebody steal one or two.
That was a place where everybody who was anybody would take their bread to be done at Christmas and the big festivals, and also the source for our bread here. Then when you graduated from the baker shop, you had what was called a Dutch oven. You remember that? And I remember graduating from that to that oven that my father bought and had in the yard, because it was a big something.
And then the McGarry's, and after the McGarry's used to be the bus stand.
There was never enough room for all the buses, but it was cluttered, and so they made as much room as possible, you know, so the next bus that was moving would always be at the front. So if you're going to town and you see a bus marked Bridgetown, you don't have to wonder if the one behind is moving, because the one at the front is the one that's moving. And while you waited, the scent from the bread shop, from Payne's bread shop, wafted up to you. Oh, the turnovers and the salt bread and everything that came from in there was wonderful. And when there were weddings, Mr. Payne would bake a lamb for somebody, all right? And then that scent would waft to you as well, like on a Friday, because the wedding is Saturday and Friday evening. He would be baking that to prepare it for the next day. I remember things like that. And people came by bus early in the morning with these huge baskets, and they would be buying large amounts of salt bread to take back to sell at schools and to sell in their little shops. In those days, when you got a cheese cutter, it was like a full quarter pound of cheese in that cheese cutter. And it was, you know, a cheese cutter and a juicy was a regular Bajan thing. And, you know, that was a regular meal for people, and it was a regular lunch for children going to school. So I believe a lot of those people were taking, you know, the bread back to sell in their shops for cheese cutters and ham cutters, and you really got a good sizable set of ham inside of those cutters. One of the things that we used to love to do at the baker shop, you got some butter from home and you came down and you got the bread hot, and then you put the butter in the bread, the butter melted, and that was a delicacy for us. We used to enjoy that, really enjoy that. Early, and this was early in the morning when, you know, you would go down, because sometimes children would line up to go and buy bread for lunch, because they have to go back home and make lunch to take to school, to whichever school they were going to. And so that area was a little hive of activity early in the morning. And I am not talking about, when I say early in the morning, you know, we're talking here before 6 o'clock in the morning. This is early, really early in the morning, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
It's a shame to look at the bath. When we had one bath in Speightstown, when people had a land to bathe.
The area that is now the community center, that used to be a police station when I was very young.
They had the one up the hill too, but this was, we call it the main yard at that time. Big police station, and where the tri-case and thing used to be up the hill, but this was the little one. You got to make a call, you make the call there quick, or you run down the road there quick, and they will come up on the bicycle, and so no motor cars at that time.
The policemen, there was no crime, a lot of crime, you know. The policemen were in there very often just playing dominoes or drafts or whatever, and people would stand by the window and look inside and watch them. I know that activity shifted from here to District E at Station Hill, and well, that was, I don't know if they had any more activity there. And of course, you know, there was an old folk song that I used to hear my mother singing, saying, Policemen with the number on their back. Policemen, some are thin and some are fat. When you pass along the road and you hear an awful snore, you can bet your life it is a policeman, because they would stand up along the poles on Church Street sometimes and they would fall asleep because there was nothing to do. The crime rate was low, there was absolutely nothing to do.
A church to the north of them, and then there were all houses down there where people live, going down straight down to Haywoods.
Houses that went from where was the public bath all the way down to where there's a villa still there standing out in the middle of the beach side.
That is true. A lot of people don't know that. I can remember all the houses that were just after you passed the bath. All the houses that were there, there was a shop. There were so many people who lived along there.
Olivet Mother and Lee Spender and Eiffels and all them, you lived there.
The houses were really close. And behind them, there were sometimes lots of boats because the sea was not as far in as it is now. You could hit 6 runs on the beach. And when you went out there, if the ball went into the water only reached you to about, maybe to your waist. But gradually over the years, the sea started to come in more and more and more. And when we got what we call the New Year rough, there's a time that Speightstown is referred to as the New Year rough. Maybe it is a fisherman's thing, I'm not sure if it is only Speightstown, but we used to refer to it as the New Year rough, and it would happen, like early in January, sometimes late December. The sea got very, very rough, and with winds like this, and the sea started to come in more and more. Not only at Haywoods, it was also happening at Six Men's. And gradually people found that they had very little yard, because behind those houses that I mentioned, people had yards, palings, they kept chickens, they kept goats. And I remember a very big breadfruit tree that we used to source our breadfruits for roasting from. A lady named Miss Herbert. And I remember so many people, the families that lived down there, the Babs and the Herberts and the Eiffel, and so many people, the Rochesters, the whole families of people that lived along there. You can't believe it now, but...
Well, then they moved them from there and carried them up in Church Street Garden.
Let me tell you about some characters in Speightstown, people that people looked up to. There was the bread vendor. There was this lady called Mrs. Husbands. She lived exactly where Pizza Man's dock is now. And on mornings, that woman would have the hot bread on her head. I got a lot of salt bread. Salt bread was 3 cents a piece at that time. A lot of salt bread from Mrs. Husbands. There was a milk vendor, Mrs. Babb. And then there was the tinsmith, who I just asked his name because we called him Mark Soldier for all of the years. His name was Campbell Jordan, but he was Mark Soldier to us. Every person in Speightstown had their what we call rangers. I don't know if you know what are rangers, but bread pan. He would make those bread pans for everybody in Speightstown. And in those days, only the high and mighty, the well-to-do had cups, but people had tin cups. So what he would do, he would put on a handle to these cups, and he would sell them. He would sell gill pots, pint pots, all measuring tools. That was Mark Soldier. Then there was the person with the vegetables. That was a lady called Mrs. Ramsey. She would sell the vegetables. And there was a man called Joseph Cullimore that went into the gullies, and he got the whiffs, and he plaited what we call down baskets, those things that seem to be a dying breed now. Yeah, down baskets, and he would sell things like tamarins in syrup. And he would sell, coming on to Guy Fawkes Day, he would have the carbide that you make the bomb. So you go and buy a bomb for a penny, and you would have your fun doing these things in the road, because the roads were not busy as they are now. In addition to that, we had a man called Richard Austin. He was a snowball man. So, and that's the first time I saw people using lime as a detergent and a germicide. Yes, because he would have the buckets, and then every time he would just wash the glasses and use lime. That was Richard Austin. There was a woman in Rowview, I really don't know her real name, but we call her Blanchy. She was a starch woman. So you would get, in those days you had what we used to call the poison cassava. So you would get the cassava and you would wring out the flour, the starch from it. And she would walk from Rowview all through Speightstown selling starch. Eventually she went blind, and people said that it was from doing the starch, I don't know. Then we had the Iceman. This was a man called Mr. Koja. He lived up just across the street up there, and he had a truck. So every morning around 5 o'clock he would leave here and go to town, and he brought the ice down to Speightstown, because people did not have fridges in those days like we have now. But the ordinary person would buy ice on Sundays. Everybody would be out on Sundays to get this ice. But the other, the establishments, the shops and so, he would supply them with ice during the week. But Sundays was the ordinary man's time. There was a mobby woman from Rowview called Mrs. Brown. So she would be walking with the mobby on her head and the bread and fish in a basket. So these are some of the characters that you would normally see in Speightstown all the time.
I always remember Speightstown for that, the generosity of people. And there was some correspondent writing in I think it was in the Times newspaper in 1867, and he spoke about the generosity of Speightstown, and he said he did not understand why the people from the south, from Bridgetown, he said they should come to Speightstown and see the generosity of people. And he referred to the atmosphere down here as, he said it was a salubrious kind of place. And he talked about how the people from Speightstown had this serenity of spirit. And he attributed that serenity of spirit to the fact that they ate a lot of fish. He said, from the little winged one to the great Leviathan.
Doesn't it seem like something you wish you were a part of? Don't you just wish that you had experienced all of that here in historic Speightstown? The good news is that the proceeding is now preserved for posterity. Certainly we hope that this becomes the impetus for someone who wished to do some writings on historic Speightstown. Well, that's it for this week. As always, I appreciate your stay with me. I'm Sherwood McCaskey, wishing you a peaceful and productive week ahead.